Hey YouTube, welcome back to our channel. My name is Elena.
And I'm Björn.
And we are Viking Age reenactors and living historians here to talk with you about your favorite Viking shows.
Today we're going to be taking a critical look at episode 19, season 6 of Vikings, and doing an in-depth analysis of what we see.
Alright, so I'll start by noting that we're all aware that Ubbe was not the first one to land in Vinland, nor the second, nor the third. With that out of the way, you know, we can definitely say that what they're showing here is not really supposed to be sourced from the sagas.
Yeah.
The story is very different.
Yes, absolutely.
General. The first Viking that had contact with the Skraelings in North America was called Torvald, and it did not go the same way as this at all.
Not quite, no. And that's kind of like a reoccurring theme that the Norse people kind of have with these Skraeling encounters. It all just seems to end up turning to shit a little bit.
Yeah. The first encounter was a lot more hostile. Let's just put it that way. It happened when Thorvald and his men were on their way back to the ship. And on the beach, they found 3 Skraelings that were hidden under skin boats and proceeded to kill them.
As one does.
As one does. After which they got really tired. This is according to the saga. They got really tired and all fell asleep.
As one does.
I don't know if it was because of the grapes that they had found or what exactly happened there. But when they woke up to this loud voice basically going, "Get up and get out because you're about to be murdered." And they were actually set upon by a bunch of Skraelings that came down and found them and started attacking them, and they had to flee.
When their friends didn't come back. Yeah, that makes sense. Checks out. Yeah, and there are a few different encounters as well that kind of build off of that, but kind of follow the same eventual end. Yeah. We know Karl Sefni was also one who was mentioned who interacted and met with the Skraelings there. He was a little bit more successful and managed to actually do a little bit of trading with them because there was such a huge divide between language and culture. The trade was very difficult, and it pretty much amounted to them just kind of laying out their goods on a blanket and then just pointing and gesturing at what they wanted. And that kind of worked a little bit. But what ended up happening was the Skraeling got poisoned from the milk that they had traded with the Norse. Thought that they were getting poisoned, but they were just lactose intolerant essentially.
Yeah.
And then came back and tried to massacre the rest of the Norse settlement, and it just went downhill from there. So,
amongst other things, I have dispatched a trusted fellow to go to that place in Denmark where the king has been converted to Christianity. I thought it was the least I could do.
And what is this trusted fellow supposed to do?
Assassinate the king, of course.
cool. So I don't really fully understand why they're kind of stressing this unknown Danish king converting so heavily. It sounds like it's a reference to Harald Bluetooth, who was kind of the Danish king to convert and Christianize Denmark. Mm-hmm. The Yellingstone was made and carved to commemorate that specific deed, which is pretty odd. Pretty intense. But it seems really strange to me that they're kind of stressing this because we've never met this character, and it just seems to perpetuate that whole heathen versus Christian mentality, which didn't really exist in the same situation. It wasn't uncommon for nobility or for kings to convert and kind of push that on their people as well. It kind of started from the top and kind of worked its way down through society as we see throughout history. And there definitely wouldn't be any kind of cause to have a foreign power try to assassinate him over it. It seems more like they wouldn't really care too much, I guess, if some stranger decided to convert. You definitely see more conflict in the sagas when family members convert. You see it in Njal's saga. I can't quite remember two names, but there was like a father and a son, and the son had converted and the father hadn't, and that would create conflict. And when they'd meet and talk about it, kind of like a Thanksgiving dinner, they'd butt heads and break stuff, and it ended up with the dad storming out after like smashing his house and things. So you definitely see a little bit of family conflict with it, but not really anything in terms of this, and it certainly would not warrant an assassination plot. So we've talked about this in the past already, but I feel like it bears repeating. This whole notion of like parties and powers assassinating each other, or anybody carrying out these secret killings, wasn't nearly as prevalent as far as we know from historical documentation as the show makes it out to be. Secret killings like this and like assassinations was one of the worst things you could really do in a Norse society, and even just beyond kind of like damning yourself to hell in the afterlife, it was also carried one of the worst punishments in Norse society as well. I mean, you could be exiled and then hunted like a dog and killed. You could just be murdered. It could trigger a whole slew of feuding, which was actually outlawed because it was so prevalent through these kind of like revenge killings and everything. But it ultimately was one of the worst things that you could do, is to murder somebody and keep it a secret. Mm-hmm. So I really feel like this whole notion of these kings and queens kind of being very like medieval, trying to kill their counterparts and gain more power, or just even for the sake of it. Like it seems very out of place in this time period or this location for it.
So this isn't something that your typical viewer would pick up, I feel like.
Yeah.
I feel like you would pick it up if you were around the reenactment community a lot and saw these shields in person, but this is most definitely a prop shield. It's not made to be a replica of a shield.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that shield alone, it looks like it's like an inch, maybe an inch and a half, possibly thick. If that was legitimate, that would be so heavy. This is just a very small point, honestly. It's not a huge issue or anything, but just worth mentioning, I guess. Yeah, way too thick for like a Viking style shield. Traditionally, it was actually really interesting. They were about, I think, they would vary, but they were about like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. People think they have to be really thick and bulky to like last, and they really don't, because the point of the shield isn't to absorb and take, brute force and stuff. It's to deflect. So you don't have to have a lot of material just in order to deflect a blow. But the Viking shields were actually tapered, so they'd kind of be wider in the middle towards where like the boss is, and then they kind of taper out towards the edges. And there was actually a recent completely historic replica of a shield made that was actually had a facing of goat skin, like a very thin goat skin, and then the edge was lined with a thicker cow rawhide. And what was interesting about the analysis and having that shield kind of get tested is it showed that the softer goat skin actually helped to kind of like cushion and preserve the blow and kind of like dampen any of the strikes and stuff against it, to kind of further dissipate the impact, which is really interesting.
Some people think that because it was lined with rawhide, in some instances what could happen is when you had a blow from something like a sword, it could theoretically get stuck in the shield, at which point you then, as the shield holder, will automatically be able to control that person or control that weapon and wrench the sword out of their hand, essentially, and then just smack them right in the face.
Exactly. And that's like a whole point in terms of all the like this movie style fighting, is you don't really want to just like bludgeon your way through things, because if you manage to get your sword lodged in somebody's shield, all they have to do is just rotate the handle and it spins right out of your hand, and now you lost your weapon.
Exactly.
So you don't want to just be beating somebody's shield to death with it. You want to take more precise strikes or use your shield more offensively, rather than just trying to like break through that. Now, that being said, there's definitely the opportunity to break a shield open, because it's historically would be made from planks of wood, all like glued and stuff together, and that's the whole purpose of actually facing your shield and having it be covered in like a linen or a hide, is it actually disguises which way the grain of the wood goes. Because if you see here, you can easily see the boards that like make up the shield, and as somebody fighting against him, if you have an axe, if you're able to place your strike appropriately, you can cut with the grain and split it completely open with relative ease. So that's the kind of the whole point of actually hiding the grain.
Now, that said, watching Harald's choreography here is actually pretty interesting. Unlike a lot of the characters in this show and in a lot of other shows that we've seen, he's not spinning around and doing a bunch of crazy twirly moves. He is actually using the shield to deflect blows and then also to try and punch with it. He's kind of alternating between the shield and the sword. You probably wouldn't be using the sword as much as these shows will make you believe. One of the most hilarious things that you learn about Viking Age style fighting is swords can actually be bent very easily, and they can be broken easier than you would expect when, you know, smashed against things repeatedly. So you would be a little bit more careful when it came to your sword. Because they could be bent so easily, you'd oftentimes find somebody on the corner of a field off to the side, just like foot on sword straightening it before they could wade back into battle and continue smashing their way through it.
Exactly, yeah, and that all comes down to like the quality of the iron and the steel that they were using. Because I mean, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Is if the sword gets, you know, beat around and bludgeoned too much, it could definitely bend, and you'd basically have to go off to the corner and be like, "Hang on, guys, time out. I have to unbend my sword real quick. It's okay. Don't worry, I'll be back in the fight in a minute." Dead. Done.
Hej, broder. Ekki komin fyrir að leita þig til Valhalla. Allfaðirinn bíður.
So I'm conflicted with this because this was a pretty cool death scene. Like I really enjoyed how they kind of did it. But we also know that King Harald didn't die in battle. Actually, kind of amazingly, he lived into his like 80s or 90s.
Yeah, which was a long time to live back then.
A very long time. I think considering the average lifespan was about 30 or 40.
Yeah.
You know, for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible to have like a king, you know, above all else, live so long. Like that's even old for like a modern sense.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah, he died of old age basically. Like he didn't even die in battle.
Yeah, exactly.
Which for a person like him that had conquered all of Norway almost seems like a sad death. A sad way to go.
I mean, sort of. I can definitely understand that, but I mean, we're also pretty certain that there wasn't just this notion of you either go to Valhalla or you go to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that kind of seems to be more of like a Christianized thing from Snorri that we get that simplifies it to make it very much like a heaven and hell kind of path.
Yeah.
But from what we kind of understand, there seems to be a couple different options that you can take when you die.
Yeah.
So it isn't necessarily like a sad or bad thing that he would have died of old age of all things, but it is regardless a pretty impressive feat for this guy who created the country of Norway in his like teens, early 20s, and then just lived for 60 odd years afterwards just being a king.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like when it comes to that, the show may have done him a bit more justice by killing him this way because it was like a pretty sweet death scene. We don't want to watch him die like in bed at an old age afterwards.
Yeah.
But one thing that they kind of miss out on when it comes to his portrayal here is his family life. I don't think the show ever really showed us any children that he had. Like, there's one that's coming, but that's about it. But he actually did have a lot of sons and quite a few daughters. We don't know the exact count of them.
Because we also don't know how many mistresses he had either. We just know a lot.
Yeah, I think it's like up to 20 children that he might have had
Yeah.
in all of his time. But two of the most talked about are Hakon the Good and Eric Bloodaxe.
Yeah.
And not actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Eric that we have here, that he left in charge of Kattegat, maybe kind of alluding to that. Obviously, he's not his son.
Yeah, not in the show, but
It's just interesting that he left somebody named Eric to watch Kattegat after him.
huh. I don't know how I never picked up on that. Speaking of Harold's family, it was really nice to kind of see his brother Halfdan kind of come back, or his dad, but in the show his brother Halfdan the Black come back and like bring him and ferry him off to Valhalla. Typically, we know from the mythology that this would be a role more fit for a Valkyrie. They were the ones who were sent down by Odin to collect the fallen warriors and take them off to battle. But I'll excuse it here, I guess, just for the story's sake. It's really nice to kind of see that notion that Ivar had kind of mentioned in passing of, you know, his brother's still by his side, always looking after him. And it's kind of nice to see that kind of confirmed here.
Yeah.
It was a very sweet, almost like tender moment where he was almost kind of happy to die. And like know that he was not only going to Valhalla, but that like his brother wasn't mad at him, and like they can just go back to like the way things were because he had so much like remorse over his death and everything. It would have been pretty great to see Halfdan come back as a Valkyrie, like in like a nice dress or like, you know, just like in women's garb or something. It would have been really silly. It would have been even better to see him as like a proper Valkyrie, like as they say in the story, is basically drenched in blood and like looking like a battle crazed troll. That would have been even cooler. But regardless, I thought they did this scene really, really good justice.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a beautiful scene. And of course, my mother told me he makes a comeback.
Exactly. Only fitting.
Yeah.
You know, that's how he came and that's how he goes out.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh, that's so dumb.
Come, Loki.
I'm not gonna lie, up until this episode, when they started to kind of hint at it, I had kind of forgotten that whole plot line.
Same, actually. It was when she said glad, I was like, oh, that does sound like happy in Norwegian. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's Old Norse. It might be Old Norse. But I know that it has to do with Norwegian language. And then slowly it started to develop. Like,
Yeah.
is that gonna be Floki over there?
Of course, his only line in this whole episode is just the signature giggle. Like, you ask anybody to do a Floki impression, they just giggle. That's it.
Basically.
Of course.
Yeah.
Man.
With the eyeliner and everything. So, Floki. Floki is a character that we don't know much about, actually. They've always had basic freedoms with where his character goes. The big thing that we know about Floki is that he found Iceland.
Yeah.
Which, you know, he did in the show, obviously, before disappearing on us. He is written about in Landama book, in which he makes a semi-brief appearance. There isn't much that is written about him aside from his trip to the Faroes and to Iceland. He loses one daughter to a drowning, and he marries the other one off along his route. The only other thing that we really know about him past the finding of Iceland is that he does return briefly to Norway, where he's asked about this new land that he found, and he actually says that it sucks. You know, he basically calls it useless.
Guys, don't go there. There's not much.
Yeah, like there's nothing there. It's pointless to go there. After which he returns to Iceland and then lives out his life there. So that's all we really know for him.
It's like
That's
maybe it was like the reverse Eric the Red of like, Eric found a shitty place and tried to get everybody to come here. Floki found an awesome place and tried to prevent anybody else from coming there. He was like,
From
no guys,
destroying
it
it."
sucks. I promise. Don't even show up. I'm going to leave forever now. Nobody follow me.
Goodbye.
Guys, seriously. Stay where you are. Yeah, but beyond that, we really don't have a lot of information. Really kind of like a footnote in Viking history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can see why they would bring him back here. Obviously, everyone was curious about what happened to him. He was a very beloved character. He's like 400 years old now. So we're doing great.
We're doing great. I like kind of seeing like all the carvings, like the pictorial references to all of the stories and all the past seasons and everything. I didn't like the style of art because it looks almost like something you'd more see of like a placard at like a farmer's market or something.
Yeah.
It really like not any kind of reference to any Viking art style that we have, which is a little frustrating.
Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
They could have done a lot with interpreting some of those Viking Age art styles.
Absolutely. It was
carvings.
Exactly. It would have been such a great little detail or just an opportunity for them to take advantage of that and run wild with like the creativity and combining their own stylized version of it with something that we actually have that's concrete and referenced. But no, it just looks like a little placard. I didn't know the Vikings were like Viet Cong. There we go.
Oh.
Hate to be a dick, but it reminds me of like the Simpsons gag of the dude who steps on the shovel and like.
That's exactly what I was thinking of a rake, but that's exactly what made me think
Yeah, like stepping on the rake of just like, but like worse.
Oh.
That's all. Just way
That's
worse.
just painful.
A baby cubby? Is that a thing?
Apparently.
It's a baby cubby. It's ridiculous.
And they have a baby, which is probably Edward the Elder, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah.
If that's their firstborn.
Yeah. When was he born? It was.
I want to say it was like.
It was like in the 870s, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 873 or 874.
Okay.
So I think it was like a week or two ago we were talking about the battles between Ivar and Alfred.
Mm-hmm.
And those actually took place before Alfred was king. It was when his brother was king still. Now, his brother died around 870 or 871. And by 873, it is believed that Ivar was already dead. That was around the time of his death. So if Edward is born around 874, we're a couple of years off here. This baby should not exist currently.
That is true.
It's just like a little bit flipped. But yeah, they're pretty close in their timeline.
Awesome.
I do feel like we're still focusing solely on Ubba's storyline. They're kind of throwing in England here and there. There's battles happening and everything like that. Things going down in Kattegat. Murder mystery plots. But I think for the most part, like for me this season and this episode and the last couple of episodes as well, Ubba's story has been the most interesting thus far. And maybe it's because it's, the brand shining new one. Let's discover new lands and meet new people type of a situation. But I do find his storyline to be the most concise, even though it doesn't follow the sagas at all, really. It's still interesting enough to make me want to see more of that and of those characters and how all of that pans out.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like the two main stories going on here is the one in England and the one in America. I don't think that either story warranted this much build-up. Yeah. I think it could have been done Game of Thrones style, just cut the season in half, screw it, let's just get it over with. But at least we're finally getting somewhere. The whole storyline in Kattegat just seems to be like a holdover. I don't really know what they're planning with for the end of it. We have one more episode to find out, I guess. But I personally, I couldn't even care about it. At this point, it's just like an abandoned town for me. This whole idea of assassinating people... Assassinating people. Assassinate.
Sounds fun.
I'm a assassinate. Guess who's back?
Back again.
I was going more Backstreet Boys, but that works too. Floki's back. Tell your friends.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified of our future videos. And we will see you in the next one.